Yeah. 3 days before the battle, Athens was still clinging to one desperate hope. Perhaps the Persians would sail past them. Perhaps Darius had chosen another target. Yeah. Perhaps the storm gathering across the Aegean would break somewhere else. Then the survivors of Eretria began arriving. Yeah. They came through the roads like ghosts, from a burned world, faces blackened by smoke, clothes torn, bodies trembling from exhaustion. Some limped forward with bleeding feet. Yeah. Others carried children who no longer cried because they had no strength left. Near the city gates, an Athenian officer saw a woman stagger and nearly collapse. Yeah. He caught her before she hit the ground. "What happened?" he asked. Her lips moved, but at first no words came out. The ships, she whispered. So many ships behind her. Yeah. More refugees stumbled toward Athens. Families dragged broken carts. Mothers clutched infants against their chests. Old men leaned on sticks. Yeah. Covered in ash, every face carried the same message before anyone spoke it. Eretria had fallen. The Persians surrounded the city. One man gasped. Yeah. The walls fell in days. Another refugee, his voice shaking with rage and terror, pushed forward. They burned the temples first. The officer looked past him. Yeah. Searching the line of survivors. And the rest of the city? A silence followed. Then the woman answered. "Those who escaped are here. Those they found alive they chained together and took to the ships." Yeah. The officer turned slowly toward Athens behind him. Already panic was spreading through the agora. Citizens gathered in shouting crowds. Merchants abandoned their stalls. Yeah. Families began dragging supplies toward the Acropolis. Everywhere the same argument erupted. "We should never have helped the Ionians. You burned Sardis. Yeah. And now Persia has come for us." Darius warned us this would happen. Fear moved faster than the refugees themselves. Then came the thunder of hooves. Yeah. A scout rode into the city at full speed, his horse foaming, his cloak snapping behind him. He nearly fell as he dismounted. "The Persian fleet has landed." Yeah. The crowd froze. Someone shouted, "Where?" The scout looked up. Marathon. The panic changed in an instant, because every Athenian understood what marathon meant. Yeah. The road to Athens was open, and standing above the chaos was Miltiades. Unlike many of the men around him, Miltiades had seen the Persians before. Yeah. He knew their discipline. He knew their speed. He knew what happened when they chose a city and decided to erase it. He knew how they moved. Yeah. How they surrounded, how they destroyed. And as he looked east toward Marathon, he understood something many Athenians were still too frightened to see. Yeah. If the Persians were not stopped there, they might not be stopped at all. That night, the Athenian generals gathered in council. 10 commanders. Yeah. 10 votes, one city hanging between courage and collapse. Half the room wanted to stay behind the walls, force them to attack Athens, wait for Sparta. Yeah. Do not fight Persian cavalry on open ground. Miltiades listened without interrupting. He let the fear speak. He let the doubts fill the room. Yeah. Then at last he stepped forward. "If we wait behind the walls," he said, "we surrender the countryside, the roads, and the initiative." No one answered. Yeah. Because every man in that room knew he was right. Athens was not built to endure a long siege. The people were already frightened. The countryside would be stripped bare. Yeah. The roads would belong to Persia. And if the enemy was allowed to choose the moment of battle, Athens would be trapped before the Spartans ever arrived. Yeah. Miltiades pointed east. "There is only one place where we can stop them before they reach the city." Still, some commanders hesitated. The Persian army might outnumber them 2-1. Yeah. Perhaps more, and Persian cavalry on open ground was not a threat any Greek soldier took lightly. One of the generals asked the question everyone feared. Yeah. "And if we lose?" Miltiades turned to him. "If we refuse to fight, we lose anyway." The room fell silent. Then the final problem appeared. The vote was split. Yeah. 5 for battle, 5 against. Everything now came down to one man. Callimachus, the polemarch of Athens, the deciding vote. Miltiades faced him. Yeah. "If we do not fight now," he said, "fear will divide this city before the Persians ever reach it." Callimachus said nothing for a long moment. Then he gave the answer that would decide the fate of Athens. Yeah. "We march at dawn." The Athenian army left the city. Around 10,000 Athenians marched east, away from their homes, away from their families. Yeah. Toward the plain where the Persian Empire waited. Hours into the march, figures appeared on the road ahead. Reinforcements, 1,000 Plataeans. Yeah. A small allied city had sent nearly every soldier it could spare, not because victory seemed likely, but because they understood the truth. If Athens fell, yeah, Plataea would face Persia alone later. Miltiades rode forward to meet their commander. Arimnestos, he said, you came. The Plataean commander nodded. Yeah. Plataea stands with Athens. Until the end, Miltiades looked at the men behind him, then toward Marathon. Then Greece still has a chance. The army continued east. Yeah. They passed abandoned farms. They passed civilians fleeing inland with carts, animals, and whatever possessions they could carry. Yeah. They passed small shrines where families stopped to pray as the soldiers went by. And then at last, the Athenians reached the heights overlooking Marathon. Yeah. Below them, the Persian army stretched across the plain. Ships covered the shoreline. Rows of tents spread along the beach. Archers formed in groups. Yeah. Infantry moved between camps. Cavalry crossed the open ground with terrifying ease. The scale of it was staggering. The Greeks took position near the inland edge of Marathon. Yeah. Close to the sanctuary of Heracles. Behind them rose the hills. Ahead of them lay the plain. One flank was shielded by rough terrain, the other by marshland and broken ground. Yeah. They were close enough to watch the Persians, but not close enough to be easily crushed. Then the scouts returned. How many? An officer asked. Yeah. Perhaps 25,000 infantry. And the cavalry? Around 1,000. A Greek soldier muttered. What many were thinking. We are doomed. Yeah. Miltiades did not turn away from the plain. Hold position, he said. We do not need to attack yet. For a moment no one spoke. Then Miltiades turned to one of his officers. Yeah. Send a runner to Sparta. The officer looked at him. You still believe they will come? They must. A young courier stepped forward. Phidippides. Yeah. Miltiades looked at him carefully. You know the road? The runner nodded. Then go. Tell Sparta that Athens stands at Marathon alone, before sunset. Yeah. Phidippides disappeared south toward the mountains. Nearly 240 kilometers to Sparta. For a long time after he left, the Greek line simply stared down at the Persian camp. Yeah. Many of these men had never seen the Persian Empire before. They had only heard stories. Stories of cities burned, kings humbled, peoples carried away in chains. Yeah. Now the empire was here, and between Persia and Athens, there was only them. The two armies settled into a tense stalemate. Neither side attacked. Yeah. The Athenians held the narrow approaches leading inland toward Athens. Miltiades understood exactly what mattered now. They did not need to destroy Persia immediately. Yeah. They needed to block the road. They needed to keep the Persians trapped on the plain until Sparta arrived. Down below, the Persians waited. A scout entered the Persian command tent. Yeah. The Greeks remain in the hills. A Persian commander showed little concern. Good. Let them watch. Should we prepare for an attack? The commander looked toward the heights. Yeah. Where the Greek army stood. These are farmers with shields. Athens will fall when we decide it falls, and every morning, the Athenians woke to the same terrifying sight. Yeah. Persian cavalry moving across the open plain. Horses wheeling in formation, riders cutting across the flat ground. The message was clear. If the Greeks fought in the wrong place, yeah, they would be surrounded, broken, and ridden down. Then finally, the messenger returned from Sparta. The Spartans are coming. Relief moved through the camp like a breath after drowning. Yeah. How many days? Someone asked. The runner hesitated. They cannot march yet. The mood changed instantly. What? The Carnia has begun. Yeah. Spartan religious law forbade the army from marching until the festival ended. Miltiades understood at once. Athens was alone. Not for hours. Yeah. Not for one day. For several more days. And every day the Persians remained at Marathon, created new dangers. They could attack the Greek position. Yeah. They could sail directly toward Athens. Or they could simply wait while fear and exhaustion weakened the Athenian army from within. Inside the Greek camp, yeah, tension began spreading again. Some commanders reconsidered the decision to fight. Others wondered whether they should fall back. Yeah. Soldiers looked down at the enemy ships and imagined them sailing around the coast while Athens stood undefended. Then something changed. Yeah. Some Greek soldiers noticed unusual movement near the Persian ships. Horses were being led toward the shoreline. Crews shouted across the surf. Yeah. Transport vessels shifted position offshore. An officer narrowed his eyes. What are they doing? Another answered uncertain. They are loading the cavalry. Yeah. Why? No one knew. Then a scout came running in from the flank. The cavalry camps are empty. Historians still debate exactly what happened next. Yeah. Perhaps the Persian cavalry was being re-embarked onto ships. Perhaps part of the army was preparing to sail directly toward Athens. Yeah. Perhaps the Persians were adjusting their position for a new phase of the campaign. But from the Greek heights, one thing was clear. The plain had changed. There was less movement, fewer horses, a sudden weakness where, only hours before, there had been a deadly threat. Miltiades understood the opportunity immediately. If the cavalry was absent, even temporarily, this might be the only moment Athens would ever get. He moved through the camp and called the commanders together. We attack now. Some stared at him as if he had lost his mind. Attack downhill, across open terrain into Persian archers, without Spartan support? Miltiades answered simply, yes, because he saw the alternative clearly. If the Persian cavalry returned, Athens would lose control of the battlefield forever. If the Persian fleet sailed for Athens before the army could return, the city might fall without another battle. If they waited too long, fear would hollow out their resolve from the inside. There was no perfect choice left, only dangerous ones, and Miltiades chose the danger he believed they could survive. The order spread down the Greek line. Prepare to advance. Across the plain, a Persian officer saw movement on the heights and hurried toward command. Commander, what is it? The Greeks are preparing to attack. The Persian commander turned sharply. What? Then he shouted toward his men. Ready the army. The Greeks formed for battle. Miltiades made one final adjustment. He strengthened the wings. He weakened the center. Not because he wanted to, but because he had to. The Greek line needed to stretch wide enough to avoid being surrounded. If the line was too narrow, the Persians could envelop them. But stretching the line meant thinning the center. It was a calculated risk. If the center collapsed too quickly, the entire army could be destroyed. Across the field, Persian archers prepared. Then the Greeks began advancing. At first, they moved slowly. Shields locked, spears forward, bronze helmets glinting in the sun. The Persians watched the line descend from the hills. Then suddenly, the Greeks accelerated. An entire hoplite army charged across the plain, straight into Persian missile fire. According to Herodotus, the Persians thought the Athenians had gone mad. No sane army ran directly at Persian archers across open ground, but the Greeks kept coming. The distance closed violently fast, then bronze crashed into the Persian line. Spears struck shields and bodies. Hoplite shields slammed forward with crushing force. Men vanished beneath the press almost instantly. The sound of impact rolled across the field like a wall breaking. For a moment, the violence of the Greek charge staggered the Persian front. Push forward. The hoplites drove into the lighter Persian infantry with brutal pressure. Do not break formation. On the wings, the heavy Greek armor and long spears began to tell. The Persian flank struggled to hold against men trained to fight shoulder to shoulder, shield against shield, in close combat, but in the center. The battle turned. The strongest Persian troops were positioned there, and they began forcing the weakened Greek center backward. Greek soldiers stumbled. The line bent. Dust exploded around the fighting. Men shouted over the clash of bronze and iron. They are holding. The center is giving way. Then the Greek center began to collapse. For several terrifying minutes, it looked as if Miltiades had made a catastrophic mistake. The Persians pushed forward exactly where the Greek line was weakest. The Athenian center gave ground. Formations buckled. Soldiers were driven back uphill under mounting pressure. The Persian breakthrough seemed moments away, but on the wings, the battle was unfolding differently. There, the Greek hoplites were crushing the Persian flanks. The lighter Persian infantry could not stop them at close range. One side began to break, then the other, and now came the decisive move. The Greek wings did not chase the fleeing enemy. They turned inward. The Persian center, moments from victory, suddenly found itself exposed on both sides. The flanks are collapsing. Pull back. But it was too late. What had looked like a Persian breakthrough became a trap. Pressure from the front, pressure from the sides, confusion. Compression, panic. The Persian line folded inward on itself. Then it broke. The Persians ran for the ships. Now the battle became a slaughter. Some fled into the marshes and disappeared into the mud. Others sprinted toward the shoreline, desperate to launch the ships before the Greeks reached them. The Athenians pursued them all the way to the sea. Stop those ships! Fighting erupted in the surf itself. Persian crews shouted as they tried to push vessels into the water. Launch now! Launch now! Greek soldiers grabbed at ships before they could pull away. Men fought in the waves. Broken hulls slammed together along the beach. Shields struck against planks. Spears flashed in the spray. At last, the surviving Persian ships began to pull away from the shore. The Athenians had done the impossible. They had defeated the Persian invasion force at Marathon, but Miltiades did not celebrate. He looked south. A scout pointed toward the horizon. The fleet is turning toward Athens, and in that moment, Miltiades understood that the worst danger had not passed. The Persian army had been beaten on land, but the fleet could still reach Athens before the Athenian army returned. If the Persians landed at Athens while the city was undefended, everything won at Marathon would mean nothing. So the exhausted Athenians reformed immediately. No celebration, no rest, no victory songs, only another forced march. The same men who had just fought through the heat, dust, blood and surf, now turned back toward the city they had left behind, because Marathon was not truly won unless Athens still stood. The Athenian army reached the city just in time. When the Persian fleet appeared offshore, it did not find an empty city. It found Athens waiting, armed, organized, still standing. The Persians did not land. They turned away. For the first time in history, the Persian Empire had been defeated in open battle by a Greek army, and across Greece, the psychological shock was enormous. Persia was no longer untouchable. Persia was no longer invincible. Even Sparta arrived too late to fight when the Spartans reached Marathon. They walked the battlefield and studied the Persian dead. They saw what the Athenians and Plataeans had accomplished without them. They acknowledged the victory. But Marathon did not end the war. In Persia, King Darius immediately began preparing a much larger invasion. Then Darius died. His son Xerxes inherited the throne. And 10 years later, Persia returned with one of the largest armies the ancient world had ever seen. The next time the Greeks faced them, it would not be on an open plain. It would be at a narrow pass called Thermopylae. Watch it now.